Was stacking firewood on the back porch when my son-in-law called. Not texted, called, which he almost never did. It was a Tuesday in late November, one of those grey Halifax afternoons where the cold comes in off the water and settles into your bones before you even realise it's happened. I'd been retired for 2 years by then, and I'd gotten into the habit of keeping my hands busy. My late wife Diane used to say I was constitutionally incapable of sitting still. She wasn't wrong. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something about the timing felt off. My daughter Amy had just texted me that morning to confirm Christmas dinner at their place, same as always, and now her husband was calling me separately in the middle of a weekday. People don't break ranks like that, unless something's shifting. I picked up. Neil. His voice had that particular flatness that people use when they've rehearsed what they're about to say. Do you have a minute? I set down the log in my hand. Sure, Spencer, what's going on? He cleared his throat. So Amy and I have been talking and, well, her mother Brenda has been having a harder time lately. You know how it's been since her hip surgery. She's been pretty isolated up in Moncton, and we thought it would mean a lot to have her spend the full Christmas week with us. The kids are excited to see her. We're going to pick her up on the 23rd, and honestly, with the spare room and everything going on, we think it'll be better to keep the holiday a bit quieter this year. Smaller, just immediate family. I stood there with my hand on a split piece of birch, and let those last 2 words sit in the cold air. Immediate family. 31 years ago, I held Amy in a hospital in Dartmouth while the snow came down outside. I coached her through her first job interview, helped her move 4 times, drove 14 hours round trip to be at her university graduation in Ontario when she couldn't afford to fly us all out. When she and Spencer bought their house in Bedford 6 years ago, I'd given them $80,000 toward the down payment. Money I'd set aside from selling the property in Antigonish after Diane passed. I did it because I wanted to. Because that's what you do. And now Spencer was on the phone telling me that Brenda, who had seen the grandchildren perhaps a dozen times in 5 years, needed the space more than I did. I see, I said. My voice was very calm. I'd learned over the years that calm was more powerful than anger, at least in the moment. Thanks for letting me know, Spencer. We'll have you over for dinner in early January, maybe the 6th or 7th. The kids would love that. Of course. Take care now. I hung up and went inside and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time without drinking it. My daughter hadn't called herself. She'd sent her husband to do it. That detail lodged in me like a splinter. Let me explain how things had gotten to this point, because it didn't happen overnight. And I want to be honest about my own part in it. Brenda, Amy's mother-in-law, Spencer's mother, was a woman who had perfected the art of being warmly insufferable. She sent birthday cards with pointed little notes inside. She brought up Spencer's childhood accomplishments in ways that subtly underlined everything her son had married down from. She never said anything you could directly call her out on. It was always framed as love, as concern, as just being a mother. She'd moved from Ontario to Moncton 3 years ago, which she'd described to everyone as a sacrifice to be closer to family, though in practice it meant she was close enough to drop in and far enough away that the visits always felt like events. She had opinions about how Amy managed the household. She had opinions about the kids' schedules. She'd once mentioned in front of me at Thanksgiving that Spencer had been accepted to a very prestigious firm in Toronto before he'd decided to stay in Halifax for Amy's sake. Just making conversation. I'd bitten my tongue. What I hadn't known, until 6 months ago, was the degree to which she'd been orchestrating things. Small things at first. Being the one who called Spencer every Sunday. Being the one who always knew the family's schedule, booking her visits during the same windows that Amy and I usually had our standing Thursday dinners, then acting surprised when it created a conflict. Amy had mentioned it once, offhandedly. Mom, Brenda, she's just very involved. It's a bit much sometimes. And then she changed the subject, the way you do when you said more than you meant to. I filed that away. The down payment was the thing that weighed on me most as I sat at that kitchen table, not because I wanted credit for it, I genuinely didn't, but because it represented something. When Amy and Spencer had come to me 5 years ago, they'd just had their second child, Owen, and they were renting a cramped place in Clayton Park. Spencer's income was solid, but they couldn't touch the Halifax market, which had gone completely sideways. They'd asked me if I could help at all. I told them I'd think about it. I didn't have to think long. Diane and I had always planned on helping the kids when the time came. She'd been gone 18 months by then. I sold the Antigonish property, took what we'd saved together, and gave Amy and Spencer the $80,000. No loan agreement, no interest, no strings. Just, here, go build something. They cried. Both of them. Spencer had said, I don't know how we'll ever thank you, Neil. I'd told him the only thanks I needed was watching those kids grow up in a house that felt like home. That was 5 years ago. Now I was being offered dinner in early January as a consolation prize. I didn't call Amy that night. I thought about it, but I needed to understand my own feelings before I tried to talk to anyone else about them. Diane had always told me I led with emotion when I should have led with thought, and she'd been right enough times that I'd learned to sit with things first. What I felt underneath the hurt was something colder, something that wanted to pay attention. The next morning, I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking records. I'm methodical by nature. I spent 30 years as a civil engineer, and habits like that don't leave you. I went through everything, the down payment transfer, documented, birthday and Christmas gifts to the grandchildren every year, all the e-transfers logged. The time I'd flown out to cover the cost of Spencer's mother's hip surgery aftercare, because Amy had mentioned they were stretched thin, and I hadn't wanted the kids to stress. That one I'd almost forgotten about. $1,200 sent without being asked. I opened a spreadsheet and started a column. Then I did something I'd been too proud to do before. I went on Facebook. I barely used it, honestly. Diane had set up my account years ago, and I looked at Brenda's page. She posted regularly. Little updates, grandchildren photos taken from Amy's posts, that kind of thing. But the most recent one stopped me. 4 days ago, she'd shared a photo from what looked like a resort. Palm trees, a pool, one of those infinity-edge setups that overlooks the ocean. Captioned, counting down to our New Year's getaway, can't wait to ring in the year with my boy and the little ones. Kai! Ha! Tagged, Spencer. Tagged, Amy's account. I read it 3 times. They were going somewhere tropical for New Year's. The photo showed one of those all-inclusive resorts in Cuba or the Dominican, I wasn't sure which, but I'd priced those trips before, and for a family of 4 plus Brenda, you're looking at somewhere north of $6,000, maybe more depending on the flight from Halifax. And 2 weeks after New Year's, on January 20th, the mortgage renewal on their house came due. Not the full mortgage, the renewal of the 5-year fixed term. Spencer had mentioned it casually in October, said they were hoping rates would come down a bit before then, that it was going to be tight with the new payment amount. I sat back in my chair. I wasn't angry exactly. I was paying very close attention. I thought about calling Amy directly, but something held me back, the same instinct that had made me wait the night before. If I called upset, I'd be the difficult parent, the needy one. Amy would get defensive, Spencer would go quiet, and nothing would actually get resolved. I'd seen that pattern play out in other families. I'd probably let it play out in my own without realizing it. So instead, I replied to Spencer's call with a text. Short, factual, no edge in it. Spencer, thanks for the call yesterday. I'd been thinking about the January visit. Before we firm anything up, can you and Amy find some time for a proper conversation? There are a few things I'd like to discuss before the new year. No rush, but soon. Neil. You replied 6 hours later. Of course, everything okay? Everything's fine. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page about a few things going forward. He said he'd check with Amy and get back to me. 2 days passed. Nothing. On the 3rd day, Amy called. Dad. Her voice had the careful quality of someone who'd been briefed. Spencer said you wanted to talk. I do. How are you, sweetheart? I'm good. Busy. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong. I've just been thinking about things, and I'd rather talk in person if possible. Can you come for dinner Thursday? Just you? The kids can stay with Spencer. A pause. Is this about Christmas? It's about several things. Thursday. Another pause. Okay, yeah, Thursday. She showed up at 6 with a bottle of wine she'd tearly grabbed last minute from the liquor store on Bayers Road. I'd made the lamb stew she'd loved since she was a teenager. Diane's recipe. The one with the rosemary and the root vegetables. I wanted her to walk in and feel like she was home, because she was, and I needed her to remember that. We ate before we talked. That was deliberate. I'd learned that people who eat together first have harder walls to hide behind. After dinner, I poured us each a small glass of wine and set a printed sheet of paper on the table between us. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, I said. I want to start with that. This isn't about guilt. It's about honesty. Amy looked at the paper but didn't pick it up. Dad, what is this? It's a summary of the financial help I've given you and Spencer over the past 6 years. The down payment, the aftercare costs for Brenda's surgery, the gifts, the transfers. I'm not asking for it back. I'm not threatening anything. I just want you to see it clearly. Because I think sometimes when things come in pieces, you don't see the whole picture. She picked it up slowly. I watched her read. The total was just over $94,000. She set it down carefully. Dad. Let me finish. I kept my voice quiet. I got a call from Spencer last week, telling me I'm not welcome at Christmas because Brenda needs the space. And I know Brenda needs connection, and she's been lonely since the move. I have genuine compassion for that, but I also know that the 4 of you are taking a resort trip to ring in the new year, and that your mortgage renewal is due in January, and that I am the person who made it possible for you to be in that house in the first place. That's not fair. Her voice was small. Which part? She didn't answer. The part that isn't fair, I said, is being told I'm not immediate family. That's the part that isn't fair, Amy. Her eyes filled. She looked exactly like she had at 16 when I told her I was disappointed in her. Not angry, just honest. It had wrecked her then too. Brenda asked for it, she said finally, quietly, like she was confessing something. She's been saying all fall that she never gets real time with the grandkids, that they have a different relationship with you because you're here all the time, and she just wanted one Christmas that felt like hers. And Spencer didn't want to upset her, and I didn't want to fight about it, so we went along with it. I know, I said. I figured that out on my own. I should have called you myself. I shouldn't have made Spencer do it. No, you shouldn't have. She was crying now. I handed her the dish towel from the counter, the closest thing, because that's what a mother would have done. I don't want to choose between you, she said. I never want to feel like I have to choose. You don't have to choose. You never have to choose. But you do have to lead. You're the parent in your house. Spencer's the parent in your house. And right now, someone else is running your family calendar and deciding who matters and who doesn't, and neither of you has said a word about it. She wiped her eyes. Brenda means well. Maybe she does. But meaning well and behaving well aren't the same thing, and what happened to me last week wasn't well behaved, it was unkind. And it came from somewhere, Amy. It didn't come from nowhere, Amy. She sat with that. What do you want, Dad? Just tell me what you want. I want to spend Christmas morning with my grandchildren. I want to see Owen open the telescope I bought him, because he told me in October he wanted to learn the constellations, and I've had it wrapped in my closet for 6 weeks. I want to have Christmas dinner with my daughter's family, which is my family, and I want Brenda to understand that I'm not her competition. There is enough room in those kids' lives for both of us. But I need to actually be in those lives to be in them. She nodded slowly. I'll talk to Spencer tonight. I know you will. And Brenda. I'm not asking you to manage Brenda. I'm asking you to manage yourselves. She stayed for another hour. We finished the wine. She helped me with the dishes the way she used to when she was a teenager, both of us standing at the sink talking about nothing. The kids' hockey schedules, a show she'd been watching, whether I was going to try cross-country skiing again this winter. By the time she left, something had settled between us. Not solved, but settled. 3 days later, Spencer called again. His voice was different this time, less rehearsed, more tired. Neil, I owe you an apology, a real one. Not a phone call arranged because Amy made me, but an actual apology. I'm listening. I've been letting Brenda run things for a long time, not because I think it's right, but because it's easier than the alternative, and I've been telling myself it doesn't really affect anyone, but it clearly has. And the Christmas thing, That was wrong. We should never have excluded you. You're the kid's grandfather. You're the reason we live in that house. You've been more present and more generous than any father-in-law I've ever heard of, and we treated you like an inconvenience. I'm sorry." I sat down in my armchair. My hand wasn't shaking, but it was close. "I appreciate that, Spencer. Genuinely. We want you at Christmas. The whole day. Brenda will be there too, and that might be awkward, but we'll manage it. You come first. You've always come first. You've always come first. I just forgot to act like it. You don't have to put me first. Just don't put me last." He laughed, a short, raw sound. "Fair enough. I'll be there at 10. I'll bring the shortbreads." There was a pause. "Neil, are you going to keep helping us with things? I'm not asking because of the money. I just want to know where we stand." I thought about that for a moment. "I'm going to keep being your father-in-law and those children's grandfather, which is what I signed up for. Beyond that, we'll figure it out as we go. But I need to be treated like family to function like family. You understand?" "Yeah," he said. "I do." The conversation with Brenda happened a week later. Amy organized it. A Sunday afternoon at their house. The kids at a birthday party. Just the four of us at the kitchen table. I hadn't asked for it, but Amy had. That mattered. Brenda was uncomfortable in the way that proud people are uncomfortable when they've been found out. She sat very straight and spoke very carefully. She said she'd never meant to exclude me. She said she'd only wanted more time with her grandchildren. She said she hoped we could move forward positively. I looked at her steadily and said, "Brenda, I don't need an explanation. I need it to not happen again." She pressed her lips together. "Understood." It wasn't warm. It wasn't a hallmark moment. But it was honest, and honest is what I'd stopped getting for a while there. So honest felt like a lot. Christmas morning, I arrived at 10 past 10 with a tin of shortbreads and Owen's telescope. He met me at the door in his pajamas and pulled me inside by the hand before I'd even taken off my boots. His sister Lily came running down the hall a second later and crashed into my legs. Brenda was there, sitting in the armchair nearest the tree. She nodded at me when I came in. I nodded back. We managed. Spencer made pancakes. Amy put on the playlist she'd had since university, the one with the old Tom Waits songs Diane had loved. Owen unwrapped the telescope and immediately wanted to take it outside despite the fact that it was 11 a.m. and we were nowhere near dark, and I told him we'd set it up together after dinner and find Orion, and his face lit up in a way that made everything that had happened over the past month entirely worth it. At dinner, Spencer gave a small toast. He thanked everyone for being there. He made a point of saying that the people around that table were the people that mattered most. He looked at me when he said it. Brenda left after dessert. She hugged the kids, hugged Spencer, gave Amy a careful embrace, and shook my hand at the door. Just before she stepped outside, she said quietly, "You're good for them, I can see that." It wasn't much, but I'd stopped needing much from her by then, so it landed the way it was probably meant to. In January, Spencer and Amy managed their mortgage renewal on their own. They'd cut some things back and picked up extra work through the fall, and they were proud of themselves for it. I didn't offer. They didn't ask. That felt right to everyone. I still have Thursday dinners with Amy. I pick up the grandchildren on Tuesday afternoons, and we do whatever they feel like. Lately it's been board games and hot chocolate at my kitchen table. Owen trying to beat me at chess. Lily insisting on teaching me card games she makes up on the spot, and whose rules change constantly in her favor. Brenda and I maintain a cordial distance. She's not unkind anymore, at least not where I can see it. Whether that's genuine change or just an adjustment of tactics, I suppose I'll never know for certain, but the kids have both grandparents in their lives, which is what should matter, and mostly it does. I think about Diane a lot during these winter months. She would have handled the Brenda situation differently, sharper probably. She had a gift for making people feel both welcomed and checked at the same time. I was always the slower one, the one who absorbed things until he couldn't anymore. But that November afternoon, stacking wood on the back porch with the cold coming in off Bedford Basin, I finally stopped absorbing. Diane would have been pleased about that, I think. She always said the most important thing she ever taught me wasn't anything to do with engineering or money or patience. It was that you can love someone completely and still refuse to be invisible to them. I found that out late, but I found it. there's a moment I keep coming back to, not the phone call from Spencer, not the dinner with Amy, not even the Christmas morning when Owen pulled me through the door in his pajamas. It's the moment I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I forgot to drink, looking at nothing, and realized that I had been so focused on keeping the peace that I let the peace become a kind of erasure. I'd spent years making myself easy to overlook, easy to defer, easy to move around the calendar like an optional item. I told myself it was patience. I told myself it was grace. But there's a difference between choosing to be gentle and simply being afraid of what happens if you stop. What changed things wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't running on resentment when I set those papers on the table in front of Amy. I was running on something I can only describe as clarity, the kind that comes when you finally stop pretending something isn't happening and look at it directly. I had the facts. I had the dates. I had $94,000 documented in a spreadsheet, not as ammunition, but as evidence of a relationship that deserved honesty. That's what I think people sometimes miss about situations like mine. It's not really about the money. The money is just the clearest way to show the shape of things, who contributes, who's treated as optional, where the gap is between what people say and what they actually do. When I laid it out for Amy, I wasn't asking her to feel guilty. I was asking her to see clearly. And I think that matters, because you can't fix what you're not willing to look at. Spencer's apology surprised me, not because I doubted he was capable of it, but because genuine accountability, the kind that doesn't come with excuses attached, is harder than it looks. He had to admit that he'd been taking the easy road for years, that letting Brenda run things was a choice he'd made and kept making because conflict felt worse than consequences. That kind of honesty about yourself takes something. It takes a willingness to sit with being wrong and not immediately explain it away. I respect him more for it than I did before any of this happened. And Amy, my daughter, she knew. That's the part that took me the longest to make peace with. She knew it wasn't right, and she went along with it anyway, because going along was easier than standing up. I understand that. I spent decades doing the same thing with Diane's difficult relatives, with difficult colleagues, with anyone where the cost of saying something true felt too high. The difference is that I was the one bearing the consequence this time, and it gave me a much clearer view of what that costs the person on the other end. What I want, if I'm being honest, is for Owen and Lily to grow up understanding that love isn't just warmth. It's also the willingness to be straight with people when things aren't right. That the most decent thing you can do for someone you care about is tell them the truth, carefully, without cruelty, but without flinching either. That's not something you can teach with words. You teach it by doing it. I did it late, but I did it. Diane used to say that character isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you do when being honest costs you something. I found out what I was made of that November, and I found that it was enough.